often think differently. They ask themselves a different question. Instead of asking, how can I make people like me? They ask, is this relationship adding value to my life? That small difference completely changes the way they choose the people around them. They are willing to walk alone if the alternative means pretending to be someone they are not. It often reminds us that self-knowledge is one of the greatest forms of power. A person who cannot spend time alone rarely understands themselves because they are constantly influenced by the opinions, expectations, and emotions of other people. But those who naturally embrace solitude develop a habit that many never master. They become comfortable listening to their own thoughts. Instead of constantly seeking entertainment or approval, they spend time reflecting on their decisions, studying human nature, and understanding their own strengths and weaknesses. Solitude becomes their classroom, and silence becomes their teacher. This personality trait also makes them less likely to follow the crowd. They are not easily influenced by trends, social pressure, or the fear of missing out. When everyone else rushes in one direction, they pause and ask whether that direction truly aligns with their values. This independent thinking often causes others to misunderstand them. Some may call them distant, reserved, or even arrogant. But in reality, they simply refuse to let popularity become more important than authenticity. They understand that gaining acceptance by abandoning your true character is not success. It is quiet surrender. Another reason they value solitude is because they recognize the difference between being surrounded by people and being genuinely understood. Many individuals have large social circles yet still feel emotionally isolated because their relationships are built on convenience, appearances, or temporary benefits. People who don't have friends often notice this contradiction. They realize that a room full of conversations does not automatically create meaningful connection. Because of this awareness, they become extremely selective about who deserves access to their lives. They would rather have no close friends than invest their trust in relationships built on dishonesty, gossip, or emotional manipulation. This personality trait also gives them remarkable emotional resilience. Since they are not constantly depending on social approval, their confidence begins to grow from within rather than from external validation. They do not measure their worth by the number of messages they receive, the invitations they accept, or the attention they attract. Instead, they build confidence through discipline, personal growth, and quiet achievement. This inner stability makes them difficult to manipulate because they are not desperate for acceptance. The less someone depends on approval, the less power other people have over them. Many of these individuals also discover that solitude creates space for improvement. While others spend hours chasing popularity or trying to impress people who barely know them, they invest that same time differently. They read books, develop valuable skills, improve their physical health, build careers, learn new ideas, or simply reflect on the direction of their lives. They understand that every hour spent becoming stronger today creates opportunities tomorrow. This is why many successful thinkers, creators, leaders, and innovators have experienced long seasons of solitude. They were not hiding from the world. They were preparing themselves for it. Of course, valuing solitude does not mean they never experience loneliness. They are still human. There are moments when they wish they had someone to share their victories or challenges with. But this personality trait teaches them an important lesson. Temporary loneliness is often less damaging than surrounding yourself with people who constantly drain your energy, pressure you to compromise your values, or distract you from your purpose. They understand that protecting their peace today increases the chance of building healthier relationships in the future. Perhaps the greatest strength of this personality trait is that it allows them to remain authentic regardless of who is watching. They do not constantly change their opinions to gain approval or hide parts of their personality to fit into different groups. The person they are in private is usually the same person they are in public. That consistency creates quiet confidence because they are no longer living to satisfy other people's expectations. Instead, they are building a life that reflects their own values, goals, and principles. The truth is that people who don't have friends are often misunderstood because society confuses solitude with failure. But choosing to be alone is very different from being unable to connect with others. For many of these individuals, solitude is not a punishment. It is a conscious decision that protects their focus, strengthens their character, and allows them to grow without the constant pressure of social approval. Their greatest personality trait is not that they enjoy being alone. It is that they value becoming the right person before searching for the right people. And once you understand why people who don't have friends value solitude more than social approval, the next personality trait becomes even clearer. They trust people very slowly because experience has taught them that loyalty is earned through consistent actions, not convincing words. Once you understand that people who don't have friends often value solitude more than social approval, another personality trait begins to reveal itself. They trust people very slowly because they have learned to observe human nature before giving someone a place in their lives. Most people form opinions within minutes of meeting someone. They are influenced by charm, confidence, appearance, or the excitement of a new connection. But people who don't have many friends usually think differently. Instead of asking whether someone is interesting, they quietly ask whether that person is trustworthy. This habit may make them appear distant at first, but in reality, it is one of the strongest personality traits they possess. Robert Greene often teaches that appearances are one of the greatest illusions in human nature. People naturally present the version of themselves they want others to see. First impressions can be carefully managed. Words can be rehearsed. Kindness can be temporary. Confidence can be performed. But character eventually reveals itself through repeated actions. People who don't have friends understand this principle deeply. They know that anyone can make promises during the beginning of a relationship, but only time can reveal consistency. Because of this understanding, they rarely rush into friendships. They allow people enough time to show who they truly are. This personality trait is often shaped by experience. Many individuals who now have very few friends were not always this cautious. At one point, they trusted easily, believed promises, and expected honesty from everyone they met. But life taught them difficult lessons. They experienced betrayal, disappointment, broken loyalty, or relationships that slowly revealed hidden motives. Those experiences changed the way they viewed human nature. Instead of becoming bitter, they became more observant. They realized that trust should not be given simply because someone appears kind. It should be earned through consistent behavior over time. One of the first things they observe is whether a person's actions match their words. Anyone can speak about loyalty, honesty, or respect. Those words sound impressive, but words alone have very little value. People who don't have friends pay attention to something far more important. They watch what people do when there is nothing to gain. They notice how someone treats strangers, how they behave under pressure, and whether they remain honest when telling the truth becomes inconvenient. They understand that genuine character is revealed during difficult moments, not comfortable ones. This careful observation also protects them from emotional manipulation. Many people become emotionally attached before they truly understand the person standing in front of them. Once feelings become involved, they begin ignoring warning signs because they do not want to lose the relationship they have already imagined. People who don't have friends often avoid this trap by refusing to rush the process. They stay emotionally balanced while quietly gathering information. They are patient enough to let someone's true personality reveal itself naturally. This patience often saves them from relationships that would eventually bring unnecessary pain. Another reason they trust slowly is because they understand that loyalty is rare. In today's world, many relationships are based on convenience. People stay close while the relationship benefits them, but disappear when circumstances change. Individuals who have few friends have usually recognized this pattern. They know that real friendship is tested during difficult times, not during moments of success. It is easy to stand beside someone when everything is going well. True loyalty becomes visible when supporting someone requires sacrifice, honesty, or courage. Because genuine loyalty is uncommon, they refuse to hand out trust carelessly. Some people misunderstand this personality trait and assume these individuals are cold or antisocial. In reality, the opposite is often true. They value meaningful relationships so much that they refuse to build shallow ones. They understand that trust is one of the most valuable things a person can offer. Once it is broken, rebuilding it is never simple. Rather than constantly repairing broken friendships, they prefer taking extra time in the beginning to understand who truly deserves their confidence. Their caution is not fear. It is wisdom developed through experience. This habit also allows them to become exceptional observers of human behavior. While others are distracted by charming personalities, they quietly notice patterns. They recognize who always blames others for their mistakes, who changes their personality depending on the people around them, who speaks negatively about absent friends, and who only appears during moments of personal benefit. These small details may seem insignificant to most people, but together they reveal a person's true intentions. People who don't have friends often notice these patterns long before everyone else does, which explains why they remain selective about who enters their lives. There is another important benefit to this personality trait. Because they trust slowly, the friendships they eventually build tend to be deeper and more stable. They are not interested in collecting acquaintances or surrounding themselves with large social circles simply for appearance. They seek honesty, mutual respect, and reliability. They understand that one loyal friend who consistently stands beside you is far more valuable than dozens of people who disappear the moment life becomes difficult. Their goal is never popularity. Their goal is authenticity. The truth is that trusting slowly is not a weakness. It is a sign that someone understands the value of emotional investment. They know that every friendship influences their mindset, their habits, and their future. That is why they choose carefully. They would rather spend extra time observing than spend years recovering from misplaced trust. In a world where many people judge others by appearances, they judge people by consistency. That simple difference protects their peace and shapes the quality of every relationship they choose to build. And once you understand why people who don't have friends trust others so slowly, the next personality trait becomes impossible to ignore. They have standards so strong that they would rather remain alone than surround themselves with fake relationships that slowly compromise their self-respect. Once you understand that people who don't have friends value solitude and trust others slowly, another defining personality trait becomes impossible to ignore. They have strong personal standards and refuse to settle for fake relationships simply to avoid being alone. This is one of the biggest reasons they often have very few friends. It is not because they cannot connect with people. It is because they refuse to build connections that require them to sacrifice their self-respect, their values, or their peace of mind. While many people fear losing relationships, they fear losing themselves even more. Most people naturally want to belong. They are willing to overlook small acts of disrespect, tolerate unhealthy behavior, or remain in one-sided friendships because they believe having people around them is better than standing alone. At first, these compromises seem harmless. A disrespectful joke is ignored, a broken promise is excused, dishonesty is explained away. Slowly, these small compromises become a pattern. Before long, people find themselves surrounded by relationships that offer familiarity but very little respect. People who don't have friends often recognize this pattern early, and that awareness becomes one of their strongest personality traits. Robert Greene frequently explains that human nature is driven by self-interest. While many people are capable of loyalty and kindness, others will naturally push the limits of what you allow. They observe your reactions, consciously or unconsciously, to understand how much they can demand without consequences. People who don't have friends usually understand this reality. They know that every relationship teaches others how they are allowed to treat you. If you consistently ignore disrespect, people begin believing that disrespect has become acceptable. This is why they protect their standards from the very beginning instead of trying to repair broken respect later. One of the most noticeable characteristics of these individuals is that they are comfortable walking away from relationships that no longer align with their principles. This decision is rarely made out of anger or pride. It comes from clarity. They understand that staying connected to people who constantly create drama, spread negativity, manipulate emotions, or betray trust eventually damages their own character. Instead of asking themselves how to keep every friendship alive, they ask a much more important question. Is this relationship helping me become a better person, or is it slowly pulling me away from who I want to be? That question guides many of their decisions. This personality trait often causes them to be misunderstood. Some people describe them as overly selective, difficult to approach, or impossible to please. But those judgments usually come from individuals who mistake healthy standards for unnecessary distance. There is a significant difference between rejecting people out of arrogance and protecting yourself out of wisdom. People who don't have friends are not searching for perfection because they know perfection does not exist. They simply believe that honesty, respect, loyalty, and mutual effort are non-negotiable qualities in any meaningful relationship. Another reason they maintain high standards is because they understand the hidden influence of the people around them. Every friendship quietly shapes your habits, your beliefs, and your emotional health. Spend enough time with people who constantly complain and negativity begins to feel normal. Spend enough time with dishonest individuals and integrity slowly loses its importance. Spend enough time with people who gossip about others, and eventually you begin questioning who they speak about when you are not present. People who don't have friends recognize that relationships are never neutral. Every relationship either strengthens your character or slowly weakens it. Because of this awareness, they refuse to chase friendships simply for the sake of appearances. In today's world, having a large social circle is often treated as proof of success. Social media encourages the illusion that popularity equals happiness. But people with strong standards see through this illusion. They understand that being surrounded by many people means very little if those relationships are built on competition, jealousy, convenience, or hidden agendas. They would rather invest their time in becoming a better person than constantly trying to impress people who do not genuinely value them. This personality trait also gives them remarkable consistency. They do not change their principles depending on who enters the room. They refuse to compromise their values just to gain temporary acceptance. If a friendship requires dishonesty, constant people-pleasing, or pretending to be someone they are not, they quietly step away. While this choice may leave them with very few friends, it also allows them to preserve something far more valuable, their integrity. They understand that losing yourself to maintain relationships is never a victory. There are moments when maintaining high standards feels difficult. Watching others enjoy large social circles can create temporary doubt. They may wonder whether they are expecting too much from people, but with time, experience repeatedly confirms the wisdom of their choices. They see others become trapped in exhausting friendships, filled with conflict, betrayal, and emotional manipulation, while their own smaller circle remains built on trust and authenticity. This reinforces their belief that quality will always matter more than quantity. The truth is that people who don't have friends are often not lacking opportunities to build relationships. They are simply unwilling to accept relationships that fail to meet their standards of respect, honesty, and loyalty. Their personality is shaped by the belief that genuine friendship should bring peace, encouragement, and growth, not constant stress or emotional confusion. They understand that protecting your standards may reduce the number of people in your life, but it dramatically increases the quality of those who remain. And once you understand why people who don't have friends refuse to settle for fake relationships, the next personality trait becomes even more powerful. They develop a level of emotional independence that allows them to rely on themselves instead of constantly seeking validation from the people around them. Once you understand that people who don't have friends value solitude, trust others carefully, and refuse to settle for fake relationships, another personality trait becomes clear. They develop a level of emotional independence that most people never fully achieve. Instead of relying on constant attention, approval, or reassurance from others, they learn to rely on themselves. This personality trait is not something they are born with. It is usually developed through experience. After spending enough time alone, they begin discovering that confidence built from within is far stronger than confidence borrowed from other people's opinions. Most people naturally seek validation. They feel encouraged when others praise them and discouraged when they are criticized. While this reaction is completely human, it also creates a hidden weakness. If your confidence depends entirely on how other people see you, then your emotional state is always in someone else's hands. A compliment can lift your mood, while a single negative opinion can destroy it. People who don't have friends often escape this cycle because they spend enough time alone to build a different foundation. Instead of asking, "Do people approve of me?" they begin asking, "Am I living according to my own values?" That question quietly transforms the way they see themselves. Robert Greene often explains that true power begins with self-mastery. A person who constantly depends on external approval becomes easy to influence because their emotions rise and fall according to other people's reactions. But individuals who have learned to stand alone develop a quiet confidence that cannot easily be manipulated. They stop chasing acceptance because they realize that acceptance gained by abandoning your true self is never worth having. They would rather disappoint the crowd than disappoint their own principles. This emotional independence changes the way they make decisions. Many people hesitate before making important choices because they fear criticism. They worry about what friends, relatives, coworkers, or strangers might think. As a result, they postpone opportunities, ignore their instincts, and slowly begin living according to other people's expectations instead of their own purpose. People who don't have friends often avoid this trap. Since they are already accustomed to standing alone, they become comfortable making difficult decisions without waiting for universal approval. They understand that every meaningful path in life eventually requires the courage to walk alone. Another reason this personality trait becomes so powerful is that it protects them from emotional manipulation. Many unhealthy relationships survive because one person fears losing approval. They tolerate disrespect because they are afraid of being abandoned. They remain silent because they do not want to create conflict. They constantly sacrifice their own needs because they believe keeping everyone happy is more important than protecting themselves. But emotionally independent people gradually stop making these compromises. They understand that peace built on constant self-sacrifice is not real peace. It is emotional exhaustion disguised as kindness. Because they rely on themselves emotionally, they also become more resilient during difficult times. Life is unpredictable. Friendships change. Relationships end. Circumstances shift without warning. Individuals who have always depended on other people for emotional stability often struggle when those relationships disappear. But people who don't have friends have already spent years learning how to face challenges alone. They know how to think through problems, comfort themselves during disappointment, and continue moving forward without waiting for someone else to rescue them. This ability does not eliminate pain, but it prevents pain from completely controlling their lives. This personality trait also influences the way they measure success. Instead of comparing themselves with everyone around them, they focus on personal progress. They understand that someone else's achievements do not reduce their own potential. While many people become trapped in competition and comparison, emotionally independent individuals compete mainly with the person they were yesterday. Every new skill, every disciplined habit, and every lesson learned becomes proof of growth. Their confidence comes from action rather than applause, and that makes it far more stable over time. Of course, emotional independence should never be confused with emotional isolation. People who don't have friends are not trying to prove that they never need anyone. Human beings are naturally social, and healthy relationships remain one of life's greatest blessings. The difference is that emotionally independent people do not depend on relationships to define their identity. They appreciate genuine companionship when it exists, but they refuse to believe that their worth disappears in its absence. Their value remains constant whether they are surrounded by people or standing completely alone. There is another important advantage to this personality trait. Because they are not desperate for approval, they become far more authentic in their interactions with others. They do not constantly adjust their personality to match every social situation. They are not afraid to express respectful disagreement, admit mistakes, or maintain their principles even when those choices are unpopular. Ironically, this authenticity often earns genuine respect. People tend to trust individuals who remain consistent because consistency reveals confidence. Those who know exactly who they are rarely feel the need to pretend. The greatest lesson hidden within this personality trait is that freedom begins the moment you stop allowing other people to decide how valuable you are. When your confidence depends on likes, praise, invitations, or public recognition, your emotional well-being becomes fragile. But when your confidence is built through discipline, integrity, and self-respect, it becomes remarkably difficult for anyone to take it away. People who don't have friends often discover this truth long before others because solitude teaches them to become their own source of encouragement. The truth is that emotional independence is one of the defining personality traits shared by many people who have very few friends. They have learned that while relationships can enrich life, self-respect must always come first. Their confidence is not created by popularity, but by the quiet certainty that they are living according to their own values, regardless of whether anyone else approves. And once you understand why people who don't have friends become emotionally independent, the next personality trait reveals why they speak less, observe more, and often understand human nature better than the people constantly seeking attention. Once you understand that people who don't have friends often become emotionally independent, another personality trait naturally stands out. They speak less, observe more, and reveal very little about themselves. While many people feel the need to fill every silence with conversation or constantly share every detail of their lives, these individuals do the opposite. They understand that listening often reveals far more than speaking, and careful observation allows them to understand people on a much deeper level. This personality trait is one of the main reasons they often remain misunderstood. Their quiet nature is mistaken for shyness, arrogance, or disinterest, when in reality it is usually a sign of patience, self-control, and thoughtful awareness. Robert Greene frequently explains that human nature is easier to understand when you spend more time observing than reacting. People reveal themselves through small habits that most others never notice. The words they choose, the way they treat people who cannot benefit them, how they respond to criticism, how quickly they change their opinions around different groups, and whether their actions consistently match their promises, all of these details quietly expose character. People who don't have friends often develop this habit because they spend less time trying to impress others and more time paying attention. Instead of rushing to form opinions, they quietly collect information until patterns begin to appear. This personality trait also protects them from making emotional decisions too quickly. Many people become attached to someone simply because they enjoy a pleasant conversation or receive temporary kindness. Excitement often replaces judgment, and emotions begin writing stories before reality has had enough time to speak. But people who don't have friends usually move at a different pace. They are comfortable allowing silence to exist. They are willing to observe how someone behaves over weeks or months before deciding how much trust that person deserves. This patience often prevents them from entering relationships that later become sources of disappointment. Another reason they speak less is because they understand the value of information. Every conversation reveals something, and not always about the person who is talking the most. People naturally expose their priorities, fears, ambitions, insecurities, and habits through ordinary discussions. Those who listen carefully often learn far more than those who constantly seek attention. This does not mean they manipulate people or secretly judge everyone they meet. It simply means they recognize that understanding others begins with paying attention, rather than dominating every conversation. Because they reveal very little about themselves, many people become curious about them. Human nature is naturally drawn toward mystery. Someone who constantly explains every decision, shares every emotion, and seeks approval for every thought becomes easy to predict. But people who don't have friends often protect their personal lives with quiet discipline. They understand that privacy is not secrecy, it is wisdom. Not every opinion needs to be announced. Not every goal needs to be shared before it is accomplished. Not every personal struggle requires public attention.